And welcome everyone. We're missing Alistair today, so yeah, we've had to reshuffle some of our roles, which is why it's been a little bit of fun. And we have three sets of speakers today. We normally have two as well, so we're squeezing a bit of extra value for you today in our session. So welcome, and without further ado, we're going to ask each of our speakers to introduce themselves, and then they have 15 minutes to share their presentation with you. And at some point, Ron, oh, thank you, Ron. Ron has added in the chat a link to our web page, which includes the slides that the speakers are sharing with you today. Okay, so over to Marcin and Magda.
Hi everyone. My name is Marcin Kleban, and I work at the Jagiellonian University in Krakow in Poland, and I work at the Institute of English Studies. And with me is one of my students, one of my fabulous students, Magda, and perhaps she can introduce herself.
Yes, hello. I'm Magdalena Marcinkowska, and as Dr. Kleban already mentioned, I'm a master art student at the Jagiellonian University and also a teacher trainee.
Right. So Magda is the start of this session. I'll be just introducing what the wonderful work that she completed or is actually in the process of doing. We're going to talk about the idea of students running a blog, a reflective blog, and yeah. So I'm going to do an introduction, and in the second part of this presentation, Magda will tell you more about this blog and what she's been doing and how this blog helped her to be more self-reflective, as you can see in the title of our presentation. So I understand we have 10 minutes, and after that, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them, or perhaps you have comments. So let me just move on with that. Yes, so you should be able to see, sorry, the second slide. Yeah, I think it's now on. So just let me explain how this blog, how this idea of students running their reflective blog came about. So, so I was approached by Teresa, and I was asked to see if any of my students or me are running a reflective blog, and I came up with an idea to suggest that my students, these are teacher trainees. They train to be at least some of them train to become English language teachers. They are postgraduate students. Would like to engage in this activity of running a blog, and my first thoughts, it was just a suggestion for my students to run a Substack blog, which is, as many of you know, probably is a very quite a popular kind of newsletter, multimedia platform, which can easily be turned into a blog. And Magda was the student who decided to start doing this activity. I'm not sure whether you can actually click whether this link, which you can see, is clickable. The first steps in teaching, this is Magda's blog, is the title of it, and you can visit it. You're very much welcome to visit it, and the hyperlink is there. So you can click on it possibly and then read Magda's reflections. Just a little bit more about the context. As I mentioned, the students I teach in my class are a group of MA in Applied Linguistics and English Language Teaching students at the Jagiellonian University in Krakow in Poland. And this blog and this blogging activity is part of the teacher training seminar, and it was an absolutely optional activity for my students. And this is important because this is not, I'd like to highlight that this is not any kind of classroom activity. It is something quite authentic, and this authenticity is something, the authenticity of this task, running a blog, is something I would very much like to highlight here. So why this type of reflection in this teacher training program? Well, first of all, through this reflection, any kind of reflection, and especially this one, this is a kind of gateway, a way of gaining insight into trainee teachers' perceptions of their competences, skills, their perceived fortes, and problem areas. Without this kind of reflection, actually, this is quite, the blog was quite revealing, because during classes, we do not have too much time. This is a seminar, so students will cover a number of areas. So we try to give them or provide them with a kind of repertoire of the up-to-date knowledge what is happening in the field of ELT, English language teaching, and there is only very little room for reflection. And this particular activity of asking students to run a reflection blog is an opportunity to learn much more about their thoughts related to teacher training, their experiences with teaching. So a very useful activity. And obviously, I treat it as for me, this is useful feedback related to informing my teacher training practice. So a number of advantages of running this kind of blog. And I mentioned authenticity. So for me, this kind of reflection through running a blog is a very authentic experience. The students, Magda was sharing her experiences with real audiences on Substack. Obviously, there was me. I'm also real, but Substack provides access to a variety of different people who potentially can give students feedback, comments on what they decided to share. Yeah, thank you. And this is, I think it's meaningful for the trainee teacher, and also for me as the course supervisor. So after this lengthy introduction, I think it's time for something really useful, and Magda will tell you more about her experience.
Yes, thank you. So about what I learned about this whole experience. So first of all, as it was already mentioned, and I also want to highlight it, having the real audience was something very good for me, because usually I'm used to having just one teacher or two supervisors who read my essays or my VA thesis. At my previous university. So here, having the real audience, it not only gave me some feedback, but also motivated me to make some conscious choices about the language I use, about the topics I cover, and also it helped me engage to some topics even more, but I will go back to it in a second. And also, using Substack allowed me to be inspired by posts of others. At the beginning, when I started my own blog, I also subscribed to other people who posted blogs about similar topics like teaching or using AI in teaching. And reading those blogs really helped me structure my own, helped me see what I can do, what I shouldn't do, because it was my first time writing a blog in general. So, for example, there was this one blog about using social media in general, which what was very much as an essay, and it
I'm not sure if we
just
lost
lost the slides for a second. Yeah, but a drop out maybe.
Yeah, I may have.
I can see you starting them again.
Okay. Yeah, Magda, are you there? Because I can't hear you. I mean, have we lost her?
Yeah, I think we've lost Magda for a minute.
Yeah, so hopefully
She's back. I can see.
she's back.
Yeah,
Okay,
she's coming.
good.
Just unmute, Magda.
Okay, can you hear me now very
Yep.
well?
Yeah, great.
Okay, sorry, I had some slight internet issues. Yes, so now about what was useful, as it was also already mentioned, receiving those comments and likes, it not only motivated me, but also it helped me engage in a deeper discussion. So, for example, I had this one subscriber who commented on my post about using AI, and she also shared her own experience and her own thoughts about is it useful for the teachers to use AI in searching for the materials or not. So yes, so it helped me also to dig more into this topic and to share my own experience with another person. But also, writing this blog came with its own challenges, and my biggest one was finding my own voice. As I mentioned at the beginning, I'm used to writing only academic essays or BA thesis and now MA thesis, which are very formal in style and register. So I'm very used to only using this formal language. And I didn't want my blog to be very formal because I didn't want to create this distance between me and my readers. I didn't want for them to feel like I'm some kind of authority, which I'm really not. But on the other hand, I didn't want to use very informal language because I didn't want to come as unprofessional. So I had to find my own voice. I had to balance between the two. And that was the biggest challenge. But I think over some time, from one post to another, I managed to improve more and more in this area. And now what I've learned in particular through these reflections, the thing that struck me the most was that becoming a teacher is not a linear process. And what I mean by that is, of course, teaching training has its own structure. I have to first go through the teaching practice in primary school, then secondary school. However, even though, let's say, I already completed my practice at the primary school, and I thought that, okay, I've learned a lot, I experienced so many things, and for sure I wouldn't do some minor mistakes at that point. That wasn't true. Even though I was experienced, there was still some slips, there were still some mistakes that sometimes happened, and accepting them as a part of the process showed me that some steps forward had to be followed by some steps backwards, and very sorry.
Yes.
I don't know what is going on.
Oh, you're back.
Internet. Yes, and finishing with the strengths and weaknesses. So writing this blog also highlighted for me the strengths and weaknesses that carried me through this whole process of being a teacher trainee. So, for example, while writing about those experiences, I've noticed that, for example, my creativity or ability to work under the stress pressure, the stress pressure, helped me to come up with some ideas on the spot. For example, when I finished a lesson earlier and I covered everything I had planned, but still a couple of minutes remained, I had to come up with something on the spot for the students not to be bored, not to just run off the class. So yes, I come up with some idea to write on small piece of paper what they liked about the lesson. So it still took some couple of minutes, but it was still productive also for me as a teacher to have this feedback from them. But also about the weaknesses, it made me realize that there is still a long way ahead of me on this adventure of becoming a teacher that there are still some things I have to work on. For example, I'm not very good with being firm to students and reprimand them when they're misbehaving during the class. And that can disturb not only the lesson, but also can interrupt other students in their process of learning. So in general, this experience was very eye-opening for me, and it really inspired me on my way to becoming a teacher.
Okay, we've just run out of time, I understand. So thank you very much for listening, and thank you. Thank you very much for your attention, and if you have any questions or comments, we'd be really grateful.
Thank you so much. And I know Marcin and Magda may have to leave before the end of this session, but certainly what we can do is forward on any further questions to yourselves, and we can add that information onto our website, I'm sure. Thank you very much.
I think Magda can stay a bit longer.
Lovely.
Yes.
Yeah.
If my internet allows me, I will, yes.
Thank you, Magda.
Well done. Well done for battling through despite the vagaries of internet connection.
Yes.
Thank
Rejoining.
you. We love the authenticity of your vlog and your learning and reflections. Next up, my colleagues from University of York, Yaprak and Liz, will be sharing their research project with students, co-produced with students on feedback, actually using feedback. Thank you.
I hope that you can see these slides and hear me okay. I'm going to take that as a yes. Okay, so yeah, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to present today on our project looking at engagement with assessment feedback. So my name's Liz Hurrell. I'm a lecturer in the Environment Geography department, and I'm joined by Yaprak Tavman from our economic department. And we're a team of academics with Sarah and Jeremy looking at effective engagement with assessment feedback. And as part of the project, we also had some student partners who helped us with this co-creation of some guidelines. The project was funded by the EDI Research Centre at the University of York. So the aims of the research was to understand how students from diverse backgrounds engage with assessment feedback, and really to identify the enablers and barriers to that engagement with their feedback, and to really understand how students from diverse learning diverse learning needs or diverse learning styles were engaging, so that we could get a better picture of how our students are dealing with their feedback. Now, just a very brief slide to think about why this project was important. We know that feedback is really important for our students. It's our way of helping them identify what they're doing really well, areas that they need to improve on with the view to helping them attain their best potential and reach their desired learning goals. And we know that to be for feedback to be effective, it needs to be engaged with over a long period of time. So not just a one-off engagement, that we need to be engaging students with their feedback throughout. But we also know that students do not always engage with their feedback. So a part of the project was to try and understand why are students not really engaging with their feedback. So here at the University of York, we use a system called Turnitin, where we can see whether a student has opened or not opened their feedback. So we do know that we do have a number of students who are not looking at their feedback, despite the time and the effort that it takes to do that. So as a team, we looked at the literature to help us understand how we could approach researching this. And then we undertook 7 focus groups with a total of 30 students from our 3 different departments to have a discussion around how students are engaging with feedback, what are the barriers to feedback. And I think one of the strengths of this project is that because we were 4 academics from 3 different departments, it enabled us to understand student experiences with a variety of assessments, not just assessments from our own departments, but how students are engaging with assessments in their other departments. And it also meant that we could ensure that students who were from, for example, the economics department were talking to me outside of the department, so to make sure they felt comfortable talking about these things. Once we undertook the focus groups, we as an academic team looked at the transcripts and we created a summary of the discussions, identifying the key points that we thought was coming out around the discussions. And we then gave these summaries to our three student partners who also looked at some literature to help them understand where our feedback, our summaries were coming from in the context of the wider literature. So they were helping us with kind of this research process. And then finally, what we did was we used these summaries of discussion, what we learned from the literature, to co-create some staff guidelines and some student guidelines to help both staff provide good feedback, effective feedback, but also to encourage students to be engaging with that feedback as well. One of the aims of the project was to try and get a diverse range of students involved. It was an EDI project, so we wanted to make sure that we had that diversity in our participants. University of York is not the most diverse university, so some of these values do kind of reflect that, but we're happy that we've kind of got the range of diversity that we are able to at the University of York. So, for example, we do have students who were first in their family to attend university. We have international students. We probably have a wider range of Year 2 students represented in our cohort or in our participants. But I think that's a good thing because they've had that experience of their Year 1 feedback and are really looking to make sure that their Year 2 and Year 3 assessments are going to help them achieve the degree that they want to achieve. When we were also recruiting participants, we wanted to make sure that we were not just getting participants who were always engaged with feedback. One of the challenges with these sorts of projects is that you often recruit some of the most enthusiastic, engaged students. So we really wanted to try and capture some students who were not so engaged with their assessment feedback. So we sent out a survey to kind of find out where students or how students were currently engaging with their assignment feedback, to try and make sure that we were not just getting those who are always engaging. So whilst we do have quite a few students who are actively engaging with their assessment feedback, we do also have those represented in our participants who were less engaged with their feedback, not reading feedback from all of their assignments, and also not revisiting their past feedback ahead of their next assignment as well. So I'll hand over to Yaprak, who's going to talk you through the findings.
Thanks, Liz. Yeah, so we didn't manage to do an in-depth analysis of the transcripts, yes, you did coding, but we did manage to see the key findings from the summaries we have produced. So as expected, when it comes to students' engagement with feedback, this varied according to when the feedback was available to students, the type of the assessment they had, the quality of the feedback, and sometimes it also depended on the grade they had received, with obviously students with higher grades not always looking at the feedback. And overall, students reported that sometimes feedback could be too vague. So this was one of the main reasons that they might not be that enthusiastic about reading their feedback. So feedback that was detailed, structured, and that feeds forward to future assessment was seen as the most helpful. Another thing that students consistently reported was that often feedback focuses on the areas that the student needs to improve, and this can sometimes be discouraging for students. So they would also like to see that what they did well in the assessment, so then they could also repeat this in future assessments. And sometimes the feedback that the students received didn't match the mark that they were awarded, and this could also make students quite confused. So next slide, please. Thank you. Then we also looked at what were the main barriers to engagement with feedback. So what could cause students not to read their feedback at all, or it could be that they were reading their feedback from the beginning of their studies, but then they stopped doing that. So what were the reasons behind those? So as Liz mentioned, at the University of York, we use Turnitin for online assessments. So we also provide the marking and the feedback on Turnitin. And one of the main things that students mentioned was that they found it wasn't very easy to access feedback on Turnitin. And also if there was a marking rubric, sometimes they also didn't know how to access the rubric within Turnitin as well, and trying to understand their feedback. Again, at our institution, the policy we have is that students need to receive feedback within 25 working days from their assessment. And for some students, it felt like this time was too long, and they felt like they've already moved on from that assessment, so they weren't as interested in finding out about their feedback. So there were also differences in terms of the style and quality of the feedback that the students received, and this lack of consistency could sometimes be also a reason that would discourage students from engaging with feedback. I think something that came out quite regularly was also that feedback felt too specific to students. So it was too specific for a particular type of assessment. This is why students didn't find it useful, because they didn't see how they could use this feedback then in a future assessment, which might be a bit different than what they did. Another issue with access was when it came to physical access. So if they had in-person exams, for example, they didn't always know how to access the scripts, or whether they could access the scripts, especially after summer assessments, because after the assessment, most of them are away for the summer holidays. And finally, students also didn't always know that they can use office hours from lecturers to talk about their feedback. Sometimes they didn't feel confident enough to approach lecturers to ask if they can discuss their feedback. And some of them are very considerate, actually. They were very considerate because they said, actually, we know academics are very busy, so we don't want to really bother them to talk more about the feedback we received as well. So to continue, we also asked students for some improvements when we were having this focus group discussion. So what are the main things that would make feedback more valuable for them? So I think consistency in structure was highlighted as very important by many students. So they suggested if there's a clear final statement that feeds forwards to future assessments, that would be very helpful. Some students also suggested a minimum word count to ensure consistency modules within the department. Students also thought it would be helpful if they could find a mechanism to compare the feedback across different modules, because then this would help them to identify the common issues that they face when they complete their assessments. And marking rubrics were welcomed by students. They said it really helps them to identify their strengths and the areas that need improving. So they also thought consistency in the use of marking rubrics would be helpful. And sometimes, as we said, there was a confusion around the use of office hours. So students suggested if they had dedicated sessions just for feedback, that could also help them to feel more comfortable using their sessions to discuss their feedback. And another suggestion was to also use whole cohort feedback summaries by lecturers. So this could be in a session, or it could be sent as an email. But they said once they receive their individual feedback, the whole cohort feedback helps them to see where they sit within their cohort. And then, of course, the accessibility issue, as we mentioned, was something quite significant for them. So making the accessibility easier would also help students more to engage with their feedback. There was also a specific suggestion from students who struggled with the word count. So they said sometimes they would get feedback which told them to expand on some points, but then the feedback wouldn't tell them what to cut down. So then this would make it difficult for them to implement this feedback because they were already struggling to keep the existing content within the word count. And finally, as we said, to make the feedback more moralizing for students as well, it is also important to consistently acknowledge their good work or effort for future assessments. So then I would like to briefly talk about the outputs we have produced from this project. So as Liz mentioned, using all these findings, we co-created with 3 student partners a set of guidelines for staff and a set of guidelines for students to enhance engagement with feedback. So we won't have time to go over these guidelines in detail, but we have the links here. So if you are interested, please feel free to have a look later. Reach out to us as well if you have any questions after you access the guidelines. The one thing that I wanted to highlight in this session from these guidelines is the feedback tracker for students. So the feedback tracker is a document with a table that students can make their own copy and use. So it is basically a table which helps students to keep a record of their feedback that they have received over multiple assessments. So here it encourages students to record the feedback, but at the same time think about the strengths and the areas of improvement and the recurring themes that come out from the feedback they have received. And then finally, students are encouraged to set some SMART goals. So they need to set some actions for themselves based on these themes to take before they have their next set of assessments to help them improve their outcomes in the future assessments.
So for our next steps, we want to do some more in-depth analysis of the transcripts. That's what we're hoping to be doing over the next few months. We need to be gaining a little bit more feedback from staff and students on the guidelines, how they're using them, are they using them, are they useful? We're just kind of coming to the end of our first kind of big assessment period after we've created these materials. So now is a time where we're going to kind of start to see how we can get students to engage with this process and also to understand how people are engaging with these guidelines. And we would quite like to, if we can, explore a quantitative analysis of who is and who is not engaging, looking at the Turnitin viewing data and seeing if we can understand whether there are specific groups of students who are consistently not engaging with feedback and helping us to understand why that might be to help them engage with their feedback going forward. So thank you very much. And if you have any questions, we'll tackle them in the chat box, or if we have time for a bigger discussion later.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Yaprak and Liz. You pretty much kept to time for squeezing all that content in. Thank you very much. Next up, we have our colleagues from Heriot-Watt. We have Alex and Andrew, and they'll introduce themselves. And I think Ron is doing the screen sharing. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I request control from you, Ron, and then you don't have to do it for me?
You can try.
I think I've asked.
Okay, give it a go.
Let's see. Yeah, it works. Hey, okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Andrew MacLaren. I'm an associate professor from Heriot-Watt University, working in the School of Social Sciences, and I'm joined by my colleague, Dr. Alex Buckley. Alex.
I work in the Learning and Teaching Academy around strategic work around assessment and feedback in the university.
Thanks very much, Alex. So today we're going to talk about an ongoing project initiative that we have at Heriot-Watt known as the Action Feedback Protocol. And by way of linking, it's lovely to follow Liz and Yaprak's presentation, because they touched on a lot of things I think we are going to also touch on. So it's nice to be reassured that we're not completely barking up the wrong tree, and our colleagues at York are doing fantastic things along these lines as well. So the title of the talk is Unknown Unknowns, because part of what we're going to discuss is around about students' awareness of their feedback literacy and how that translates into the way in which we engage with them and they engage with their feedback. And I'd just like to point out before we move on as well, is there are other very hard-working members of our little team from our own institution and other institutions whose names are at the bottom of the screen there, just to acknowledge that they're part of the project as well. So the broad thinking behind the action feedback protocol is that basically feedback quality does not equal feedback impact, and acknowledging a fact that in general as educators, we're very good at sort of mining away and producing feedback, but we're generally, I'd say as a sector, less effective at designing feedback that actually changes what students do. And I think that resonates with our previous presentation. Students receive feedback, but they don't use it, if they even read it at all, as has already been covered. But it's also about how well primed they are to receive it and how well aligned the feedback system that delivers their feedback is with their expectations. And that tends to translate to very high effort from us as staff and quite low return in terms of what we get from our students. So the action feedback protocol views feedback as a systems problem and tries to address the system level of feedback. And the idea is that this is a deliberately simple system being designed so that students are more likely to understand it, more likely to remember their feedback, and more likely to act on it. And the system breaks down into 3 dimensions. We start with tuning the ear, which is directly attending to student feedback literacy. Simplifying the message, which is in how we actually produce the feedback that is produced, particularly around assessed work. And then ensuring that the way in which those 2 other dimensions align actually encourages and achieves action. So there's multiple moving parts to the action feedback protocol, and in a way we're trying to fight a war on 2 fronts. So we're simultaneously trying to improve student feedback literacy and deliver a system of feedback which aligns with that and hopefully leads to action. So I'm going to let Alex talk about what we've done with the protocol at Heriot-Watt and at other institutions.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to say that this was very timely, the action feedback protocol, that we had been doing work since 2020 with the Students' Union around feedback literacy. We had developed a bunch of student-facing resources drawing on the Advanced HE toolkit produced by Rachel Winston and colleagues. So we had some really nice student-facing resources that we were pushing through the student partnership agreement. And then, to cut a long story short, then Andrew comes along with the action feedback protocol, which helps to fill in this staff-facing bit. So we've ended up very nicely with an institutional approach that we are rolling out now, and it's getting quite a lot of traction. It's amongst strategic initiatives around feedback, it's been the most successful by a long way. I think it really hits a nerve. And as you can see from the slide, it's not Andrew's done sterling work sharing this outside Heriot-Watt, and there has been a lot of interest from other universities as well. I think it really it's very clear how it hits the kind of issues that we were just hearing about in terms of the barriers to engagement with feedback. Back to you, Andrew.
Thanks, Alex. So just to give you a bit of an insight into how these things break down and looking at feedback literacy in particular. So the tuning the ear resources are the student-facing resources that have been designed to support feedback literacy. I'm not going to kind of explain them in great detail today, but they sort of center around a podcast and a set of written guidelines, and they're packaged on a website. And we've got a public-facing version of the website where all of these resources are available, so you can scan the QR code there, and I'll put some links in the chat shortly. But this is all designed to, based on, you know, current literature, providing students with materials on helping them understand what feedback is, what it's for, and what to
Feedback is a
expect.
specific form of interpersonal communication.
That's just a little clip from the podcast there. I'll move on because I'm very conscious of time. But we've been running a pilot at the University of Surrey on feedback literacy, on the effectiveness of these resources. And we did that last year. We're just about to submit our paper on that for review. And we're now rolling out a full university wide survey using the same approach at the University of Surrey across all departments, and basically we were looking at confidence in using feedback, and this is really just a sort of illustrative demonstration, but the thing that was really interesting about our results was that we did a pre and post survey, and we found that on these three dimensions in particular, there was a statistically significant change in students' confidence on feedback literacy after they'd engaged with these resources, but their confidence went down. So there was a sort of adjustment effect of engaging with feedback literacy resources where students essentially were acknowledging that they were perhaps overconfident in their understanding of feedback prior to engaging with materials that were directly trying to get them to engage with it, which was not what we expected. In actual fact, we thought our resources were fantastic and the students, you know, would improve their understanding, but their confidence decreased. So that sort of showed us that these three dimensions are important, and it hints at the value of really deliberately priming students in what feedback is in order to make sure that we're meeting them in the right place with what we do with feedback. So moving on, that's our work around feedback literacy, and this aligns with the way in which we produce and deliver feedback using the action feedback protocol. And as I said before, that's all around about simplifying the message. So I think the broad idea here is that the simplify the message philosophy is that we're not trying to download our expertise and show the students all the things we know they did wrong, which I think somewhat echoes what the previous presentation was talking about. It's about curating the things that we want and believe the students can realistically act upon, and are packaged in such a way that increases the likelihood that they will actually take action. And so the action feedback protocol specifies 3 comments in a deliberate order, which are very clearly signposted as such. So literature suggests that 3 is the optimum number. We start with a motivational comment. So we motivate with the first comment, identify the things that were done well in the work. We inform with the second comment, which is highlighting areas of improvement, and we make sure that we finish with a feed forward comment, highlighting how could anything from this work, in particular the stuff that has already been mentioned, how could anything be considered and focused upon and reused, returned to improve performance in future assessed work. And interestingly, given the previous presentation, there's literature that suggests actually with undergraduate students in particular, the highest value comments, actually the motivational comment, not the comment correcting areas for improvement. So we start with motivational, then we inform, then we feed forward, and all of these 3 comments, so that the 3 comments might have 1 or 2 points within them, but they're short comments, and each one satisfies what we call the 4 S's. So each comment is specific, substantive, supportive, and most importantly, signposted. We say to the students, we're about to tell you something you did well, here it is. we're about to tell you something where you could improve, here it is. Because we all know that getting feedback is quite an emotional thing, and students may not realize that they are being told what they did well or where they could improve. So we need to hammer it home and make sure it's explicit. There's a whole set of educator resources attached to this, which we've developed, and there's a public-facing website with these resources on them, so you can scan that, and again, when I share the links, you'll be able to click on the link. So these are all the materials that we use at Heriot-Watt and the other institutions that are using the AFP are available to anybody if you'd like to explore them further. So I'm going to show a short video now. The one thing that was interesting to us in some of the feedback we've had from students is actually the benefit of just the alignment between expectations. So when we inform students around what they should expect feedback to look like, and then the feedback is delivered in a certain way that aligns with those expectations, both kind of structurally and substantively, it makes the feedback feel easier to use. So that was something that was reflected in this clip. Hopefully you can hear it. Do something with your reactions if you can't hear it. I apologize if you can't.
The format of the feedback actually made such a difference. It's weird, but it kind of looks exactly how I expected it to, and as a student that made it really easy to trust and understand. It's a bit like a map where all the landmarks are really clearly marked and you feel really confident in following it, and it made it really easy to move forward with the feedback and actually understand it.
So that's that kind of point about it feeling like a map really stood out to me. And another thing, we speaking to students all the time about their engagement with and their use of the feedback. Another thing that jumped out was a student saying, sometimes in the past it feels like the feedback's not for me, it's for the lecturer. It's a piece of work that they've produced that they own, that's for them, and I'm privileged enough to get to read it, sort of thing, as opposed to it being delivered and packaged and expressed in such a way that makes it valuable to me. So that idea of the feedback system actually producing something that's deliberately easy to navigate.
The format.
And just to finish off, it's called the action feedback protocol. The third dimension is encourage action. So the whole idea here is that embedded within the system is an approach that elevates the students' capacity, understanding and willingness to take action on their feedback, but we also want them to have somewhere to go. We want there to be that sort of scaffolding in place that, you've read your feedback, what next? So those resources also include, the previous presentation also talked about a kind of tracker. So the previous, the end of the comments that students receive has a template text that talks about, as you can see on the screen here, it says, make an action plan for your feedback. Now that you've read your feedback, it's important you take action on it. And then there's a blurb and then a link to the resources that gives students some guidance on what they can do with their feedback, where they can go next. We've also got template tutorials and workshops for facilitating cohort level feedback after the fact. So there's various materials that we've been developing and are continuing to develop to support educators in helping students take those steps towards taking action. And I'm going to stop there to say, I think one of the things that continually surprises us in this process of working on feedback is that we make a lot of assumptions about what feedback is and how it's used and what students understand and believe about it. And my experience so far is that every time I come across the fact that I make an assumption like that, it usually gets entirely shattered by the reality that I encounter as we engage with people who are using the action feedback protocol. So I was asked to maybe make a prompt question to the audience, and this is my question: what assumptions do you currently make about students' ability to interpret and use feedback? So thank you very much indeed. Thanks, Alex. Thank you for listening. and we'll be sticking around if there are questions.
Thank you very much, Andrew and Alex. Yes, fabulous. What a wonderful project. Lots of quotable bits from there. I'm going to hand over to Teresa to help host our Q&A.
Yeah, thank you. What a fabulous session. And yet again, in the chat, lots and lots of resource sharing and supportive comments as well for students who've participated, which is great to see. So by all means, do come back to the chat or export the chat from Zoom, but the chat will be available on the Xerti resource. So if you've missed the links, they are in there. Lots of really helpful links from all our presenters actually today, but certainly around feedback literacy and plans of action shared in the chat. There hasn't been a lot of questions. There's been a few questions which presenters have very kindly responded to in the chat, but there's been quite a discussion around use of Turnitin for providing feedback as a platform, perhaps, and concerns around the accessibility. Maybe because we are used to, as academics, jumping in and out of lots of different platforms, we don't always appreciate just how complicated that can be for a student perhaps working on a particular module who's now got to get their head around another platform. So there has been a discussion around alternatives and accessibility for Turnitin. And there was also quite an interesting discussion around whether platforms should make it impossible to access your mark until you've read your feedback, and requests to include that as a feature within the platform that you're using. Certainly, it's a question worth asking. And questions around the format of the feedback. But it was lovely to see from Andrew's presentation, they're really clear 3 steps, make sure and signposted feedback so that people know what to expect, and how that really contributes to action and to use of the feedback.
Could I ask a question?
Please do.
Teresa. I was just spotting one of the recent comments. Steve Bentley talked about a study showing that students are bad judges of their own performance, and that was very much something I found in my teaching years. There was one particular module where I got the students to mark their own. They had their rubric, they marked their own assignment, and then I marked the accuracy of their marking. Which was extremely interesting to do, because I noticed there exactly the same thing Steve's mentioning, which is where able students are much harder on themselves than weaker students. And I was wondering if there's anything in the work that either York or Heriot-Watt have been doing that kind of works, that builds on that in any way, or that helps minimize that kind of big difference between bright students underestimating how clever they are and weak students overestimating.
Not particularly. I mean, I see Lillian's put the Dunning-Kruger effect. I was going to say that's known as the Dunning-Kruger effect. So less experienced participants will overestimate their capacities, and more experienced will underestimate. I know that there is some contestation around the reality of that because of things to do with the context of how it's measured, and it's interesting. Like in the context of academic work, I imagine assumptions on the part of more capable students around how the marking scale is used might actually influence how they end up underestimating their score, which may create more of an effect size. But I think one of the things that came across to us from our results on that pre-post is that students, sort of generally speaking, are lack an understanding that gives them the ability to accurately make sense of what feedback is and what it's for, irrespective of their their kind of average in terms of performance as a student. Trying to sort of boot camping them as early as possible in their educational experience is really important. Sort of reset. I have a lot of opinions about how some secondary education systems make our lives slightly challenging in terms of the expectations that students have when they come into university settings. Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised to see that students would rate themselves like that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, and that chat has been continuing in the chat, that conversation. So keep it going, folks, and don't forget we have a LinkedIn group. If you're not already members, please join us on LinkedIn so that you can asynchronously make those connections and follow up on things that have piqued your interest today. And before we lose any of our speakers, I just want to mention that we do issue Future Teacher presenter badges to all our contributors. So look out for the email and please display with pride. We're very grateful to you for sharing your expertise through Future Teacher.
I've got a question for Magda, if I can be verbal about it. I think most of us here who are teachers have been through a process of creating portfolios, reflective portfolios. It's part of teacher training. I think what I struggle with the most is continuing to do this when I'm not aiming for a qualification. I wonder if you've got anything to say about either aspirations or any thoughts about what would motivate you to kind of keep up with something like that?
I was actually thinking about that because I was thinking that, okay, the project is, let's say, over now. So should I keep this blog still? Like, what's the future of this blog? And I think my motivation, like I also said during the presentation, is having this real audience that even though I'm not aiming now to anything specific, now I just want to still share my experience, and maybe some people will be interested not only in how the teaching training looks like, but also what's happening to me in this regard. And also I think because for me it's also like journaling, so I really appreciate it being saved somewhere. So in the future I can look back, and the same way I did now with my experience in training, that I can look back on my strengths and my experiences, what was difficult, what was not. So yes, so I think it would be that having this real audience and also having it saved somewhere that I can go back to it in the future.
Thank you very much. I noticed in the chat as well, Yaprak and Liz were replying to comments about the fact that there was a slightly manual process for the students to kind of almost like copy paste feedback and keep track of it over time, as it were. And part of me kind of thinks that the slightly manual process forces an action, which links into what Heriot-Watt speakers have said about this, doing something, you know. If you bother to copy and paste to keep a longitudinal view of the comments you've had from all the lecturers and all the modules, you're more likely to feel you've got skin in the game in terms of doing something with the thing that you've collated, as opposed to a system that just does it for you. Any thoughts on that from both York and Heriot-Watt?
Yeah, this is why in my response I said in a way it encourages students to decode the feedback they receive, because then they actively need to think, okay, what is this feedback telling me, and can I actually see myself from the feedback provided, what I did well, what I need to improve, and what consistently comes up as something that I need to work on. And then it encourages them, similar to the last presentation, to think about some actions and then go. So I think when students are manually doing this, they engage more with the feedback as well, rather than a system doing it. But I feel like if obviously a system does it, maybe it takes a bit of the burden off of them, and they can spend more time on thinking about how to use the feedback. So yeah, I'm myself not entirely sure. I feel like students usually prefer easy ways out, isn't it? So.
Andrew and Alex, do you have anything to add?
I'll just agree that I think your sentiment's very accurate, and personal experience, if you write something down in pencil and it makes you remember it more, right? So any kind of, in a way, sort of in a kind of friction that makes it more involved is more likely to lead to landing. And so I totally see that. I think the challenge is when you're trying to operate at a system level, is where's the point where it dips beneath the threshold that it's not effective enough on average, that you need to do something else to get it over the line, sort of thing. And that's where we have discussions about how do you embed it in classes and in programs, so that it becomes something that, there is a workshop or there is a tutorial, or to kind of just encourage students to do it. Because I do agree with you, that's a really good idea. Leaving a little bit of manual labor in there is probably a good thing.
Is it possible to front load it in assessment design, so that if you have an assignment, whatever the assignment is, that the first 5 marks of that assignment go into a free text field where you explain what your practice, or what you are aiming to do better in this assignment than you did in the last one, and that might be a real focus for students.
That's something we've talked about at Heriot-Watt, is with the feed forward comment, is if you give a student an opportunity to show how they've taken previous feed forward comments that have obviously been deliberately designed to be applicable to other assessment, and say, so how did you use it in this one, is something we have talked about. But I see there's talk of turning it in Canvas and VLEs and things. So the technical challenges of doing it are a different conversation. But yeah, I agree. It would be great to do that.
Yeah, even providing all modules with a cover sheet where students are constantly carrying over feedback from previous, because obviously as a current tutor, you don't know what the previous feedback for the student was from another tutor either. So having that visibility might be, it's an aspiration we all have, isn't it? To join up across a program.
But sometimes it's something as simple as a cover sheet that travels from one thing to the other. So it needn't be a big technical challenge. It might just mean thinking about the problem in a more lateral way. Although, I mean, that's not in any way undermining fantastic ideas and things that we've had today, but it's about how perhaps embedding it in the assessment rather than in the feedback, or making the feedback embed in the assessment, might help join those dots.
Isn't there a danger of assuming that the student isn't happy with how they're doing? I mean, lots of students, are happy with a 2-2 or a 2-1, and if you start feeding back to them how they get a first, they're just going to ignore it, because they're looking at the mark, and they're saying, I don't want to put any more work in. I'm okay. And we're assuming, that they all want to get a first.
Yeah.
Before we carry on any further, I am going to say a big thank you to our speakers for sharing their time with us, and for creating for us a very exciting and very inspiring session. Lots of people have said they're going to take time to revisit your resources. So thank you very much for sharing all of that. I'll just stop the recording here.